that the grind is out of the way, I can actually explain a bit more in detail what just happened. Because this should be the highest recorded damage, with certain stipulations, I guess, in Crystal Project on turn 1. Stipulation is that the monster didn't get a turn yet, otherwise you could probably do some other shenanigans, making the enemies skip their turn with moves like Trick Slash. And most of the testing seems to be done on the level 60 dummy. So let's talk about what just happened. The key ingredient to the strategy is move coup de grace on Assassin. Single target dagger skill. This used to be not weapon locked from what I understand, so people combine it with a bow that did double damage when the enemy is asleep. But all the videos I found on that were not optimizing the debuffs to the absurd amount that I did. So I figured out a way to do even more damage anyway on the current patch. So this move does bonus damage per debuff applied to the target, and as a downside removes all debuffs. And the passive of the assassin is that if you were to kill an enemy, you do if dealing 100% extra damage to an enemy would kill it, you do that extra damage. So we're just doing double damage based on that. I don't actually know if that 100% is after everything else, or when the other percentage buffs are applied or not. I don't know all the details on the damage calc of this game. But the assassin based on that is a prime target for doing as much damage as possible in one hit, both because of the innate passive and set ability. Now you're noticing I'm not actually passive, I'm a mimic. Mimic can just copy the innate passive of the subcommand. And the upside of Mimic is that you get access to all equipment. We will go over the equipment later and see why that's better. So we just want to apply as many debuffs as possible to the enemies and have as many buffs as possible on our character. There is various types of debuffs in this game, and I had to work out what is the most efficient way to apply them. The general default is every character gets one action and can kinda apply one debuff. There's a few exceptions to that, like the Shaman class can apply Burn and Fatigue with one skill, for example. But otherwise you generally you do one action, you do one debuff. There's 4 down debuffs: power down, armor down, magic down, resist down. There is the 3 dot damage debuffs: bleed, poison and burn damage. There is blind and silence, and there's a bunch of miscellaneous debuffs. And like I said, you can generally apply debuffs with certain skills, but there's also 2 other ways to apply debuffs. One is via equipment. Certain weapons have innate debuff application. The more typical stuff you would use during a normal playthrough is something like the Fish Skewer, implying bleed for a turn. There's weaker daggers that do that as well, Poison Kiss and Fish Gutter. Or the Torch applies burn. But there's also some weirder debuffs. Either they are debuffs you normally don't get to apply, like Rent, or there's Paralyze. And there's another sword I used to use, which is more consistent, the Cutlass, applying evasion down. And then there's weapons that have a chance to apply a debuff. Blind and Silence on the dagger. These are the only 2 daggers that do this. The ninja can dual wield weapons, so now I get to equip bows. And bows are daggers, so now my ninjutsu skill, which is important, evaluates both of these hits, and I get the 10% chance each. So yeah, like just a lot of little things to concern yourself with. Most characters get 2 actions if I just enter the I can't do that because of auto abilities on. Yep, get me out of here. Let me undo auto abilities, very convenient way to do this fight over and over again without having to input quite as many actions. We can look at the turn time, because that was the other thing that was really tough to optimize. The turn order in this fight is Jason gets 2 actions, Tao gets 2 actions, Blagarotna gets 2 actions, Noemi gets 1 action. This is all on purpose. Noemi is the Mimic Assassin, the main damage dealer, which has buffs that only work on the first turn. Is that actually still true at this point? I've been through so many iterations of this. But yeah, this is kinda for convenience do already. I guess it's not actually true anymore, but I also don't know like what other debuff I could let you do that oh no, I could apply Weep on turn 1. Oh no, don't tell me I can do Weep as well. But now I need to work out how you're still bottom threat and oh no. Okay, we're just gonna assume that doesn't work and this is the maximum I can do for now. But yeah, the damage dealer actually doesn't really want to apply debuffs at all. Just oh yeah, thank God, cross helm is only for 1 turn. Yeah, I figured. You get plus 35% damage on turn 1 on the first action, which is why my damage dealer is only doing 1 action, but everyone else is doing 2. Sponsored by various things. A, everyone, and conveniently that's really close nearby, so might as well go over that. Everyone is female, because women are faster, the more you know. Speed just seems to be the most important stat in this game, so my default while playing through was just optimizing speed. There tends to be a class that also doesn't give up too much for mages, chemist with mind and spirits, and beatsmith for strength-based characters, and I guess thief for Noemi. Well, that was the gross change I actually already talked about, so yeah. 5 speed on my warrior. This used to be a thief, but for damage assassin does more. 5 stars in dexterity, 2 stars in strength. The next best thing I think is the rogue with 4.2 stars, 4.5 stars in dexterity. Coup de grace scales with dexterity, so you just wanna maximize the dexterity stat. And for my 2 mages I just use chemist, because we get 4 speed and decent enough mind, spirit and max MP. But that's not super relevant to this. Like the secondary parts of it, the only thing that matters here is getting enough speed so everyone gets actions. And not just actions, but also in the right order, because we are also using Fire Seal as a debuff, which makes the target take more fire damage, but it is removed by damage, so the ninja Blagarotna needs to act last before Noemi. So we're having 3 times 2, 6 actions total on the non-damage dealers, and the stipulation there is that Blagarotna wants to do that last, the 6th action, and so Noemi wants to do the 7th action before the enemy acts. And between having dancing shoes on all characters for haste at the start of the fight, and then being able to manipulate speed a bit with Celestial Crown for all attributes. Dragon Mail for all attributes, that includes speed, and the Rogue Vest for plus 20 speed. And everyone having the passive Preemptive, which just means minus 50 turn time at battle start equipped. I managed to actually get 2 actions even against the late game bosses. They have similar stats to this testing dummy. And I get to have most of my characters execute 2 actions. And I could like swap around who has what gear when it comes to the little speed gain. Celestial Crown is plus 10. First suit is plus 10 speed, minus 20 TT. And the Rogue Press is plus 20 speed. To work it out so that Blagorodna is acting last. So then the next question was like, which classes do I use to apply the debuffs? Because there's a lot of redundancy when it comes to debuffs, specifically for the bleed, poison, burn debuff, and also for the whole armor down, power down, etc. stuff. I was probably a bit biased to like what just my default characters were, but I think Warlock is an obvious choice because you get to double cast and then apply 2 debuffs, which don't overlap with anything else. Frost and Blaze. Can't apply other debuffs to the enemy, so you can't do more than that. But that is just 2 debuffs with 1 action. The other thing, which is super obvious, yet I didn't have it for way too long somehow, until I reached the 100k threshold. I did not actually have Tower on 2 actions. But yeah, I mean, Spotlight, take 35% more fire damage. That is one of the 2 reasons why we go fire. And the second is, there is a pretty high damage dagger which does inherent fire damage. And that is just better than using the best dagger. And you have to use a dagger because the coup de grace ability is dagger locked. But yeah, it turns out this is way more damage with Fire Seal, etc, etc. Even than Diamond Dagger plus Stone of Jordan. I tested that as well. The issue here, you have to give up one of the other plus 35% damage equipments, which we will talk about later. Jumping a bit here back and forth, but also trying to remember and covering everything in. I don't have a script for this. Like I said, there's Power Break, Armor Break, Resist Break, Magic Break. Resist Break comes from the Warlock, and then I can just apply the other 3. Armor Break is obviously very important. Ninja is an obvious choice because A, Fire Seal, and because B, being able to use 2 weapons. And otherwise, like, it doesn't super matter. Like, Chivalry, like I said, is just my default to get another Magic Break in. You could use, like, other stuff here. I checked, I didn't find any other classes that apply a relevant debuff that actually buffs my damage output even more. The only other thing you could do is use a Chemist for the random debuff from Sap Break, I think is the ability. I tested that briefly earlier and discarded it. Where's the Chemist there? Yeah, this one. Just apply random debuff. It does not respect whether the enemy has a debuff already or not on it. So certainly you can't just say like enemy has 10 debuffs, apply this, it will have another one. It just often enough applies the same one again. There's one debuff that enemies can do to you that would be really relevant to this, and I tested briefly if Sep can hit it, and it didn't seem to be the case. Which is Wither, which I think is just a stronger form of Rend. Rend is minus 10% defense, and Wither is minus 100% vitality. If I could apply this to the enemy, this would be a massive increase to these numbers, but I don't think that's actually possible. But yeah, the reason to use mostly physical classes over stuff like Shaman is that you can physically hit enemies, and now you can apply debuffs with weapons. You could also apply debuffs with accessories, like Poison Talon, but we get these from passives. So, for example, Jason's abilities. Can you sort by what's equipped? I guess not. We have Crippling Throat, which applies 2 debuffs, which the Shaman would apply, by the way. Another reason to use Shaman. 35% of the time. And we also have Blood Spiller and Venom Coat, which apply Poison and Bleed, guaranteed. So now, if Jason hits the enemy once with, I think my default here is Power Break, we apply the Power Break from the Battle Skill, the Rend from the Boomer Sword, the Bleed and Poison guaranteed from the passives, and then sometimes the Fatigue and Daze. And similarly, you also have a chance to apply Fatigue and Daze, and you also have a chance to apply Blind and Silence. Fatigue and Daze, you have 6 procs to apply it for a 35% chance each. 6 because of the dual wielding, so Jason hits once, Blagorodna hits twice, and then both characters act twice total, so 1 plus 2, 3 times 2, 6. So I get 6 procs on a 35% chance application, which generally means that those 2 debuffs are gonna be applied no matter what. The actual grinding out to get the highest possible damage, which I did, involved getting both the Mage Measure and the Eclipse proc for Blind and Silence. I get hit with each of these weapons twice total, so it's a 10% chance twice on each of them. Means it's a 81% chance to not apply the debuff, and or vice versa, a 19% chance to apply it, which means 1 in 25 fights on average would be the chance to get both of these for the absolute maximum number. When playing this game normally, you don't need that at all. This overkills every boss by a factor of like 4 at least. So this is just a completely, for the sake of science, min-maxing thing that I did. I don't know if luck actually increases the chance to apply these debuffs. I had luck equipment on first, but I swapped to the scope specs for accuracy, because if I use the Boomer Sword instead of the aforementioned Cutlass, I actually have a chance to miss on my ninja quite a lot. This is really nice, by the way, if you don't care about the inconsistencies, about like the absolute upper end of damage. Just apply the evasion down buff, and now your characters can't really miss anymore when they do their physical. It's pretty nice. Sadly, the Boomer Sword is two-handed, otherwise I would have needed to work out if I can actually dual wield them as well on the warrior, by being a ninja. Didn't mention blank pages. Begin battle ready to act immediately. Another good turn manipulation thing. And I think otherwise we are at the passives. I mentioned preemptive on everyone. I mentioned Bloodspiller, Crippling Coat, and Venom Coat. Both Blagorodna and Noemi need Adrenaline to have enough AP to do the action I want them to do on turn 1. Which would be Armor Break. Though I don't think that actually is required, it's just like, why not? I think I could apply a different debuff with a ninja. Like I said, there's flexibility in the sub-commands. But there's no pressure on the... Oh... I guess there is kind of pressure? Let's see, on the fly build improvement. Yeah, I think I can swap. No, you don't have the PP right now. Who cares? We could probably have replaced this battle skill with Chivalry, because the nice part about Chivalry is that these can't miss. And now you get around the... Well, not only do we get around the accuracy issue, you also get around the AP requiring issue. And then you don't need Adrenaline. And you can equip Perfect Vision on the ninja, so you get around the accuracy issue. Slight optimization I should add to this at some point. And yeah, I think that's everything. So it just like goes through the fight once. Not gonna hit the maximum damage I had earlier, but yeah, we do Power Break on you, and now as you can see, we already have the power down from the Power Break, we have Rend from the weapon, we have Bleed and Poison from the guaranteed passive, and we hit the Daze 35% chance already. That's already 5 debuffs with 1 action. Next, double cast, 2 actions, Frost and Blade. place for 1 debuff each. And armor break on you. Like I said, this 94% chance is completely unnecessary. You could have that work all the time with the slight modification I just mentioned. Resist break gets the last down. No, that's wrong. Magic break gets the last down debuff in. Spotlight for more fire damage. And now my ninja is getting the last action before my damage dealer for a fire seal. Which I could also make it so it hits 100% of the time with that modification I mentioned. And now you can check how many debuffs the enemy has. The default is no scroll bar, Daze and Fatigue hit on average, and Blind and Silence don't hit on average. And if both Blind and Silence hit, you get the absolute maximum number, which was, I don't actually know, 158,000 or something? Need to check that later, that's the first time I'd gotten it. Did testing yesterday where I had 154,700, but I didn't use Rend at the time, so this is a slight improvement. But this is 140,000 damage without any variance at all to this build. Obviously it uses quite a lot of late game equipment, but most of it is not required. Yeah, speaking of which, I didn't actually go over Noami's equipment in depth. The Flame Spike for physical attacks gaining fire elementals, I mentioned that. You get to equip a shield, but there is no shield that buffs your damage output from what I'm seeing. So I was experimenting with water damage, but there's no spotlight equivalent, so it doesn't work. So normal scar doesn't actually matter. The other four matter a lot though. Let's start with the accessories, I guess. These are... You deal 35% more damage and take 35% less physical damage, but you get a pretty massive downside with them. Undead means you can't be healed, and Bone Trophy means max HP minus 50%. These are generally absolutely worse downsides. You can play around those downsides with a lot of skills. You can use Stalwart. You can use Autolife. You can use Smoke Screen, I think, to dodge the first physical hit. Like, I'm not saying every character needs to be set up like this, but your main physical damage dealer absolutely can. Just even when not going for one-shot builds, use these without too much issue in most boss fights. The Assassin's Cloak. This one is kind of funny, because this is the main reason to go Mimic. Despite being an Assassin's Cloak, the Assassin can't actually wear it because it's light armor, and Assassins wear medium armor. This gives plus 50% dexterity, and dexterity is the main scaling stat for Coup de Grace. So turns out this is better. It's better to be a Mimic and wear this than to be an Assassin and wear the next best equipment. And the Cross Helm gives you power up, another 35% more physical damage bonus. All of these are technically different types of buffs, so despite giving the same kind of offensive physical damage buff, they can stack with each other. And having Cross Helm equipped and getting power up from your weapon, from your equipment, frees up some PP, because you could use, what's the name, Initial Oomph otherwise, but you just don't have enough PP for that. And now that I can unequip that, I can use Backstabber instead. Deal 20% more physical damage if you're the target's bottom threat. I mean, I'm pretty sure on turn 1 everyone is a bottom threat when everyone is tied anyway, but also this character did not get an action, everyone else did, so you are trivially the bottom threat of the time, get another 20% damage. And at that point the Cross Helm is better than Captain's Helm or something that increases attack and dexterity. I think that's everything. This went through a lot of iterations and I'm sure I missed something, and it is also pretty flexible in what you can do. But for now, I don't think anyone else has done more damage to an enemy in this game on turn 1. So, figure this is worth recording. And just as some general closing words, this is my favorite JRPG I played this year, and I played and really enjoyed Expedition 33. So, pretty high praise. This is just such a perfect combination of open world exploration with platforming and Metroidvania elements. Sequence breaking being part of the experience, and the combat system is interesting enough to tie well into the exploration. You can fight really hard bosses really early if you know what you're doing. It has been a real treat to play this. Alright, that is everything. I hope I didn't forget anything. I'll see you in 2 days when I find another micro optimization to get another debuff in and do 5000 damage more, and then I have to grind out the silence and blind procs again. That's gonna be fun. Nice. Alright.